The world of work is changing rapidly, and in this podcast, we're examining the challenges and possibilities emerging within this change. We're talking about everything from labor market information to how to enable the thinking and doing that leads to better workforce development and employment outcomes. This is the Workforce Collective podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Workforce Collective podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Meeks, content creator and marketing assistant for Workforce Collective, and today I'm joined by two amazing women, Camila Concha, research and data coordinator at Workforce Collective, and Thalia Semplonius, research and project lead at Workforce Collective. We're discussing Canada's increased demand for newcomer talent, what this looks like for Niagara, employer bias, and the barriers newcomers say that they face the most. First, I want to thank you both for being here, and thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us on the show today.
Of course. All right, so let's get into it. Canada's new immigration levels plan aims to invite more newcomers now than previous years, with up to approximately 500,000 newcomers per year, totaling almost 1.5 million newcomers by 2025. Why do we think projections have increased compared to previous years, and what does this look like for Niagara, specifically for our workforce?
That's a great question. I'll start out with why we think projections have increased compared to previous years. So one big factor is population changes. We know that the workforce is aging, so immigration has been a way to say, hey, this is a way that we can continue building the local workforce. Another factor that plays into this is also through economy recovery. So looking at the immigration plan, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, or IRCC, as we'll probably refer to them throughout the podcast if the organization comes up, they note that parts of the economy recovered quite quickly and they're facing labor shortages in some key sectors, and we've heard that locally as well. When we see what this might look like for Niagara and specifically our workforce, we can look at components of population growth. These components could be factors like births, deaths, or immigrations. And immigration as a component of population growth has been pretty consistent over the past number of years. However, when we look at preliminary estimates for the number of people that immigrated to Niagara between 2021 and 22, we see that this number has almost doubled compared to levels we saw the year prior. And then when we look at the key labor force age, so individuals 15 to 64, this trend is even stronger. It's also important to note the different pathways that immigrants are coming to Canada through. At a national level, we know that by 2025, we expect just over 60% of newcomer admissions will be through the economic class. So this means individuals' admissions have been approved based on skill sets and also labor force needs.
It sounds like the increase in projection has a lot to do with labor shortages. And I heard you say the aging population, would that be the baby boomers and their move to retirement?
Yep. So people moving to retirement, we know retirements may have started happening earlier than expected, mainly due to the pandemic that we've been experiencing too.
That's very interesting. So Camila, you immigrated from Colombia to Canada. What education or training did you pursue on your journey here, and what made you want to do it abroad?
I studied economics at Cardiff University, and then I did a master's degree in economic development and innovation at the University of Waterloo. The reason to pursue my studies in the UK was that a British degree is recognized all over the world, which as an international student opens up global opportunities and provides a competitive advantage when looking for jobs outside my country. Also, studying with people from all over the world was a very enriching experience. And the reason why I studied in Canada, it was not only for this quality of education, but also because of the immigration opportunities for international students, such as the post-graduation work permit that allow me to work and remain in the country after finishing my studies.
That makes a lot of sense when you say that the UK education is recognized all around the world, because we deal a lot with immigrants that are internationally trained from their own countries. And that can be a really difficult process to get accredited and certified to show that your credentials from somewhere else are valid anywhere else.
Yes, exactly. For some countries, the homologation process is more difficult.
Mm-hmm. And I like that you say that it was an enriching experience, because I can just imagine pursuing education somewhere I'm not from, and that scares me. That could be pretty scary. So I like that you say it was enriching.
Yeah, it was a great experience overall.
That's great. So you've both been part of our research facilitation team that hosted design labs with employers seeking to hire newcomers, as well as focus groups with newcomers. Through this work, what barriers did immigrants say they were most commonly facing?
So one of the barriers to finding employment most mentioned by newcomers was a lack of Canadian experience. Newcomers are often asked for Canadian experience directly and indirectly during the recruitment process. Another common barrier is not having connections in Niagara, which is an obstacle to, for example, getting interviews. Newcomers also mention that recommendations from their past employers in their home countries are not often received by Canadian employers. The assessment of foreign credentials is also a barrier to finding employment, as it's a process that is often time-consuming and complicated, especially for regulated occupations.
Okay, that's just like what we were just saying, how those with credentials from another foreign country, it can be really difficult for them. And I can imagine it's hard to get Canadian experience in your field where everybody wants you to have Canadian experience already. And, bills need to be paid, right? That must be tough. It's not uncommon to hear highly skilled newcomers and internationally educated professionals working jobs like Uber or fast food places. That's because many just aren't hired for the fields that they're trained in versus those that are born in Canada. So, Thalia, why is that?
Camilla's mentioned a couple of these. So yeah, the expectation for individuals to have Canadian experience. And I think, Caleb, you're just saying this is the catch-22, right? If it's hard to get a job in the first place, how are you going to gain local experience?
Exactly.
A big challenge, waiting again for foreign credentials or education to be recognized. The validation and value of international work experience is another big barrier. If you're in regulated professions like health professionals, waiting to have your skill set transferred to the Canadian system is another big challenge. But we also hear of factors like bias in the hiring process, communication barriers or language barriers through the hiring process. And Camilla, you noted another great one, limited or lack of a professional network, particularly when we know there's lots of jobs posted online, but a lot of jobs are also available through word of mouth and referrals. So if you don't have that network here, that's a whole area of jobs that you don't have access to.
Yeah, you hear people say not only when it comes to getting a job, it's about who you know, but a lot of people also say it's about who you know knows.
Yes.
So building that kind of connections can be tough.
Exactly. There's so many factors that are in play.
That's difficult. So we regularly engage with employers, and we have a report published on our website called Employer Perspectives on the Hiring and Retention of Newcomer Employees. What were some of the key findings of this report?
Some of the key findings of the report included that many employers in Niagara experience challenges understanding immigration employment regulations, for example, work permit rules and labor market impact assessment. They also acknowledge that there is a systemic bias that exists in the hiring process, in terms of, for example, expecting the candidates possess Canadian experience, as previously mentioned. Employers are also often unsure on how to connect with employment services in the region that support them with newcomer hiring. Other key findings mentioned in the report that we got from Toronto data and national level trends are that newcomers have lower employment rates and higher unemployment rates in comparison with people born in Canada with the same levels of education. Additionally, international students graduating from Canadian institutions earn about 20% less than Canadian graduates in the first year after graduation. All of these factors prevent many newcomers from integrating successfully into the Canadian labor market.
I heard you say that there's a systemic bias. What is this bias and how does it present?
So I think we've touched on a couple of these already. Factors like language barriers, value of foreign credentials. You both have mentioned Canadian experience. We know this is not a question that you're allowed to ask when hiring, but it may come up implicitly. So why is international experience not valued? And then given this challenge, there's a lot of research out there showing, well, newcomers may then take more junior roles or try to gain experience through volunteering, which are good opportunities, but they don't pay if you're volunteering, right? So again, thinking through all the other factors that newcomers here are trying to deal with, that's another challenge. Another kind of systemic bias that has come up in some conversations we've had over the past year are challenges in hiring and the number of applications that come in. So some employers might try to use programs that help them sift through resumes that are incoming. However, these programs may look for keywords that newcomers that are unfamiliar with the lingo in the local industry sectors, they might not be familiar with these words, right? So if those aren't included in resumes, that may just get filtered out, not as one that's moved through, right? So there's these little things that we might not think about as being biased, but when you actually consider the implications of how does that tool maybe impact other groups, that's another bias that is present.
Do we feel like this is a standard across all employers, or do we feel like maybe this has to do with like case to case based on the employer's understanding and training in this kind of area?
I think case to case, because we don't always hear the same experience from each employer we chat with, right? Some use different strategies. So really it's discussing, okay, what are the pros and the cons? What might be the impacts of using this strategy versus another strategy, right? So having those discussions, I think, starts to kind of open up people's eyes to, okay, maybe this is actually having an impact I didn't think about, alongside, implicit bias that happens as well.
Okay, then for employers that are maybe not as, I don't want to say not as formed, but are looking to do better and better position themselves to attract, hire, and retain newcomer talent, what resources are out there, or what steps do you recommend taking?
Yeah, a number of different strategies. You could have diverse hiring panels, anonymize job applications that come in. You can critically examine your hiring process, as I was alluding to before. So why are you asking specific questions? Is there potential that the questions or requirements that I have are biased? Do I need to have these requirements in my job post? Yes or no? You can connect with local organizations that work with newcomers. This could be settlement organizations, employment service organizations. There's many locally to connect with. And another way to involve yourself would be to offer or participate in networking opportunities that are specifically targeted to meeting newcomers that are looking for work.
Okay, so employers can find this kind of change, can search for areas of improvement within themselves, within their hiring process, the questions they're asking. They can reach out to people for help and for understanding, and then actually reach out to the newcomers themselves to try to make it a little bit of more even playing field.
Yeah, many different ways, and there are so many resources available to help with this too.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your insight and as always your time. And I'm sure you've given some great insight to everyone listening. And thank you, everyone listening. If you're an employer looking to improve your workplace culture and learn more about intercultural intelligence, contact your local Immigrant Employment Council or visit iecc.net to access a full list of resources available to you. And we invite everyone to follow us along our journey on Twitter, LinkedIn, and our website at workforcecollective.ca. And stay tuned for more episodes of the Workforce Collective podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, or just say, Alexa, play the Workforce Collective podcast. Thank you all for being here.